Well, Ben, first of all, thanks for taking time for this conversation, and I'm personally excited to join another FreightWaves event. Thankful to Craig and the team for asking me to present here, and equally thankful for those that are watching from home or from their office that they're lucky enough to be back. And look, I think the goal of this conversation, it's timely. It's what has been the impact of COVID on the freight tech and transportation logistics tech market, and how and where is the market going to shift given the dynamics that are changing in the supply chain this past 7 months or so. Before we start, Ben, I think and hope it will be helpful for folks to appreciate your background and what you bring to the table here in terms of experience in the sector. I'll just tee you up a little bit and give you a moment or two to introduce yourself, but you're a growth equity investor at Susquehanna Growth Equity. You have been associated with assets like Global Trans, the spinoff and then sale of 10-4, the investment in MacroPoint, and then ultimate sale to Descartes, and now you're in BestPass. I'm sure I'm missing some others, but if you wanted to give a moment or two on yourself, where you fit in the ecosystem, I think that would help people as they understand how and where you're coming at the sector.
Thanks, and really appreciate folks at you and the folks at FreightWaves for having me on. Like you said, I'm a partner at Susquehanna Growth Equity. We are investors in growth stage technology companies. So it's companies with between 5 and 75 of revenues, all software and technology companies serving enterprise and markets. I lead our supply chain practice. We spend a lot of time thinking about the freight world, broadly speaking, not just in the pure software way, but in payments and other technology-enabled ways. We have invested in those companies that you mentioned, Dave. We also have a company called B-Stock Solutions, which is serving more broadly in the supply chain in the retail marketplace for overstock inventory. And then we've gotten involved in a number of supply chain planning solutions as well. So we think about supply chain pretty broadly as a firm, and really excited to be here today.
And for everyone's benefit, my background's on the investment banking side of the world. I lead the transportation, supply chain, and logistics technology practice at DC Advisory. We are purely advisory side, so we're not a venture capitalist or a private equity group. So we work with intermediary. We're an intermediary that would work with folks like Ben or your company, perhaps if you're watching. My background includes working with clients like DriveWise, Truckstop.com, MacroPoint, as I mentioned earlier, B-Stock, Decisive, Ship Express, Synovia, GPS Insight, and I'm sure I'm missing others, and for that I apologize. But I think what you're going to hear from both Ben and I is a long-winded way of saying we've been in the space a while. We know enough to be dangerous, although we're not operators, and we have opinions on where the market is and where it's going. So without kind of further delay or intro, Ben, give us your view on where the market is today. And I think we'll have a chance to talk about COVID and what that could mean for the segment going forward, but maybe a level set on your thesis around the broader segment, and whether that's freight tech or transportation tech or supply chain tech. I think we can just bucket all those together.
There's the kind of broad scope and the narrow scope. The broad scope is, Dave, you and I got to know each other as we were coming up in the, just after the last recession in 08, 09, and thinking about freight technology, we're definitely two of maybe a pretty small handful of people looking at this market. And over the course of the past 10 years, the market has really accelerated dramatically in terms of its adoption of new technology, broadly speaking. And I think what's happened is, I spent all of my time with growth businesses. A whole category of venture-funded businesses has emerged as well, and it's been really impressive just to see the emergence of this category in the ecosystem in general. There's a huge number of problems to be solved, and I think that there's a lot of opportunity out there. Where are we today, kind of in this macro cycle? Is it doesn't, if you'd asked me in April and May, and I remember you and I had a long heart-to-heart about this back then, I'm surprised to say that things are still going. I think in the broader venture and capital allocation world, people are still excited about the mega trends. People are looking through COVID, and frankly, in fact, COVID has accelerated a handful of the trends that we've been excited about for the past 10 years. Ranging from e-commerce, different types of packaging of delivery, the whole last mile category has blown up, and I think that investors, people on my side of the table, frankly, and sellers, are as excited as ever about the opportunities in the freight universe.
We've been around the same conferences since I was skinny and you had hair. So yeah, I think we've both seen the evolution a little bit. In terms of themes I know are kind of core to your thesis, I think of visibility, kind of driver management, and that can be, products that address the driver shortage, workflow tools, et cetera. All those seem to be increasingly important given, the challenges in the supply chain we've seen coming out of COVID. So with that background, kind of what are a couple areas you're excited about as you think about the uptake of software, or the continued uptake of software in the supply chain over the next 2 years or so here?
My thesis, kind of broadly speaking in tech, in freight tech, and broadly speaking across what I consider to be slower adopting industries, and this is a highly fragmented industry, in many ways a capital constrained industry, and for all those reasons, it's relatively slow adopting of technology. I look for companies with a relatively simple product, simple value proposition, and taken to market in very highly effective and kind of easy to explain ways. And that was the insight that, frankly, that you brought to us with MacroPoint. We saw that live at Global Trends and the increased demand for visibility. Ultimately, it was a very, very simple solution. How do I put my trucks on a map, right? You could say it in 3 and 5 words, or how many words that is. Easy to say, incredibly difficult to deliver, and ultimately very network-based in terms of the way that all that information was procured. You worked with Bennett for years before you brought him. You brought kind of that opportunity to us, and then we worked with him for the duration of that investment. I think that whole concept of visibility is a great example of the simplicity of that solution. We look for similar types of opportunities. I mean, that's what has the ability to break through all of the day-to-day operational intensities and the grind that truckers are working through, right? Like, how am I supposed to think about trucks on a map when I've got fuel prices and tolls and regulatory issues and all these things that are being thrown at me? Not to mention just how do I get from point A to point B? With so many kind of modern pressures kind of on my organization, you need to have something that's simple, clear, and extremely high value to break through that. And frankly, that's one of the reasons we like the toll market, and that's one of the reasons we were so excited about getting involved with the folks at BestPass. It's as simple as saying our roads are crumbling. We need to raise money for those roads. The way we're going to do that, because taxpayers aren't going to pay for it, and the government certainly isn't going to pay for it. It's going to come out of the driver on the roads, and so tolls are going to rise, and people paying toll, and toll is a pretty complex thing, especially for coast to coast and multi-jurisdiction truckers. And so that was a really exciting opportunity for us, and ultimately very, very simple in that same vein. We see the similar opportunities around safety. Kind of how do you take the technology that's permeated the cabs of our trucks and enable kind of greater functionality using that platform as a jumping off point. I think there's a lot that can happen. We're seeing that develop, and I think there's a lot more that I think these emerging platforms are going to set up for launch.
And I'll go a little bit off script here, Ben, but I think what you touched on is a core to how I approach the market as well, right? There are still a lot of businesses that are dealing with Excel spreadsheets and fax machines and emails and phone calls to manage delivery of goods and services across the supply chain. So it doesn't necessarily need to be a voice-activated AI technology to address challenges in the supply chain. And that's nothing against anybody who's listening that has a voice-enabled AI engine or anything like that. But I think the point we've made is, and we've kind of managed through, is we're still like at the meat and potato stage of addressing some of these challenges across the supply chain, right? And small niches can create a lot of value for yourself and other shareholders, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a $10 or $20 billion TAM. It can be a small TAM with a very ferocious user base, right? And you mentioned network effect, and I would add marketplaces to that as well. So, and any kind of commentary or response to that?
And I also think that, and we discovered this with MacroPoint, what we underwrote as a relatively niche TAM is probably 10x larger than we thought it was. And I think that's true across, if we look at, we're broad software investors. We've made 10 investments in 10, 14 investments across the supply chain. We made 60 investments overall. And really kind of one of the great themes we've seen is that, today's niche market, today's $200 million market is going to become $1 billion+ market, because what happens is, as soon as you have visibility, there's a lot of stuff you want to do with it. You want to figure out how to extrapolate into visibility, provide notifications, provide all kinds of scenario analysis, modeling analysis, optimization analysis. We are, like you said, we're kind of getting out of spreadsheets, but as soon as you get out of spreadsheets, there's a lot more that first step is going to unlock, and that creates TAM, and that creates a lot of opportunity.
As we kind of transition to a post-COVID environment, are there a couple themes that you're excited about more so than others? And what I'll say before you answer is, look, the evolution of the supply chain, we've obviously seen ebbs and flows the last 7 months, areas where, some would argue that the supply chain broke for a moment or two. But I think a lot of the software that you and I spent our time with were key to getting it back up and running, or to help it continue to run, or help carriers and brokers bob and weave as they needed to move out of different lanes. So I think both of us are big supporters of what technology can do. But absent that, let's talk about 2 or 3 areas that you're more excited about than others going forward.
I mean, I'm still just blown away by last mile. I think it's a massive opportunity. 5 years ago, I took a deep dive into last mile technologies, and it was stunning for me to realize, we'd seen all this value created in the creation of new technology companies in over-the-road freight, right? You have Omnitrax, and there's probably 15 companies north of $200 million in enterprise value that were born out of the need for greater technology in the trucking supply chain, kind of bulk truckload. Last mile is an enormous market in its own right, and you could maybe list 2 companies, and Amazon. And Amazon is a full stack business that somehow managed to capture all of the value created in last mile logistics. It was a stunning reality. And now I was just, I'm going off script as well. I just saw Shopify announced revenues up 100% year over year this quarter. 100%. It's like a staggering number, and I don't understand their multiple. God bless them, but it's I think it's telling of this last mile ecosystem finally starting to develop. I don't know what it's going to look like. There's a host of delivery solutions, a host of last mile delivery, warehousing, and kind of the logistics to create the merchant experience around that. But I think there's just a huge amount of excitement around, anytime you have a business that's going from $500 to $1 billion of revenue in 12 months, there are going to be a lot of people who benefit from that type of growth, a lot of different companies. And I think that there's just a lot of, that's pretty rich, fertile ground for the creation of new businesses. And I'm pretty excited about that.
I'd say, Ben, pick one of 2, either, vehicle maintenance or driver management as, kind of other areas that I know you're spending time in.
Vehicle maintenance, I think, is an incredibly exciting space. You worked with the folks over at Decisive. There are a host of other companies in this market. And again, this is one of these places where there's a rich ecosystem of services and providers to come. But I think that by getting visibility into the cab and into vehicle condition, we get access into billions of dollars of spend that's very uncoordinated today. Connecting payments individuals, payments companies, maintenance providers, equipment providers, and the OEMs themselves that are all interested in gaining insight into how things are moving over the road. Your clients have taken advantage of that. I think that we're in the very early innings of that story. So very exciting stuff.
Well, Ben, thanks for joining, and again to the FreightWaves team, Craig, and everybody else, thanks for having us.